I think that because I think that the feminist effect on musicology was extremely real in terms that there were a lot more women that were able to get into musicology. And then also, I think that the that news item in the Daily from 1985 where Susan got into a fight about whether Prince was greater than Mozart. But it really, I think that the other people that are connected with new musicology didn't get into that kind of a fight. And I think that was one of the most important fights. And it was also so early, 1985. And so that's why I'm nominating her as the main figure here. And so, yeah, I think another thing is that she's written some autobiographical chapters that I got to read, and they'll be in her next book. And I think those will explain a lot also as far as how she's come along. And I think that you have to understand the old musicology before you can even really start to talk about the changes, the new things that came about around 1990. And these things
Mm.
we're about to talk about might seem so fantastical, you won't think they're credible. You might think like I'm just exaggerating, but it really has come that far in living memory. And um, I'm going to ask Susan, um, for instance, okay, and you alluded to this a little bit, but uh, there was this disdain for music as heard. It was it was even performing music was it was like that was low. That was, I mean, so one musicologist told me the only reason to put a record on the record player is to see if it's defective or not. Um, and so I think that the idea was you would just look at the scores that and you could hear it in your head, but you shouldn't actually have anything to do with sounding music.
Right. Uh, when I was a graduate student at Harvard, uh, if the faculty found out that you were performing, they would throw you out of the program. There were a few exceptions. If you were a church organist, that was okay. And so I got by doing that. But otherwise, if they found that you did a recital across town, you were in very, very hot water. Um, uh, I spent some time at the University of Chicago after I finished my degree, and Howard Brown, who was a very great scholar, was constantly getting told that because he had a collegium, that meant he wasn't a serious scholar, that you had to choose between whether you were going to be a scholar or a performer. You could not do both, because if you were performing, that meant that you were having to make decisions and that destroyed your objectivity. And so you could not do both. I have never been able to understand how you can be a musicologist without also being a performer. I don't understand that at all. Uh, but that is the way it was. And it
Yeah.
isn't that they could look at the score and hear it. They didn't. They couldn't. I was in a seminar on early 17th or mid 17th century opera. And Because I had been a coach and an accompanist for all of my life, I could look at things and see what they sounded like. But no, we were just kind of flipping through these facsimiles. This is before anything was transcribed. And so one day I said, would anybody like to see what this sounds like? And they all went, well, oh, whatever. I mean, they really weren't curious. And so I went over to the piano with a facsimile and I sang and played a bit of it. And they went, oh, wow, that was sort of cool. And I thought, what are you doing? I mean, you're spending all this time just squinting at things and you have no idea. I mean, how does that make sense? It
Mhm.
did not make sense to me, shall we say.
And is it true too that for the comprehensive exams at Harvard, you had to write a sonata form or something, a
A
movement,
few.
a fugue? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, because
But yeah, but the qualifying exams, they could and did ask you anything, anything. So I had gone on strike for Vietnam around when I was supposed to take my qualifying exams. And the upper administration had said, if students want to go on strike, you can't hold it against them. You have to let them do that. So I had to take my qualifying exams the next fall. So this was payback time. So this was a 3-hour oral exam. I had two questions. Number one, what primitive tribe improvises cannons? Anybody here know the answer to that? No? And you all have PhDs? And you don't know that? So this went on for about an hour and a half. He said, there's only one group that does this, and you can't be bothered to remember. And I said, I do know that Manfred Buchhofzer talks about this in his Summer Canon article. And they said, yes. And what tribe is it? So this went on for an hour and a half. Just, you don't remember? How can you not know that? I mean, it was unbelievable. So, anyway, then they said, pygmies improvise cannons. Second question, what year was the valve on the French horn patented? I mean, and so the same thing, been round and round. I know that Brahms preferred the horns without, I mean, throwing out all the information that I had. And no, it has to be the year it was patented. So, yeah. Those,
so
it was as a result of that, in all of the programs I have ever been involved with, I always make sure that students are picking topics that we give them time to build up a bibliography, to really invest in that, and that they have some idea what they're going to be asked. And we don't ask factoids. We ask barn door questions to see if the student has assimilated all of that stuff. But no, I mean, it was really just grotesque, the kinds of things that the hazing
mhm.
that we went through. Yeah.
Well, were there other women students?
Yes, they were also basket cases. Yeah, it's some of them quite famous. A couple of them survived. Susan Ewens
Mhm,
was a classmate, and Ruth DeFord,
mhm,
and they survived, but it was difficult, and the misogyny was really upfront.
mhm,
When I got married, I was called into the chair's office, and he said, "We never would have accepted you into this program if we had known that you were the marrying type, because now you're just going to spend all your time washing dishes and having babies." And then, because I was married, nobody actually read my dissertation. It's probably just as well. But they just didn't see the point because I had already announced that I was not a serious scholar because I got married. Yeah.
Well, uh,
Enough of that. Let's not talk about those kinds of war
yeah.
stories.
Well, I'm amazed when I look at even back in the 80s, what were the topics that were the things that were on, your seminars and also in what was the papers given at AMS. That was, I mean, even historical context was too wild. I mean, it had to be about just the music and the music in the most,
Yeah, but it wasn't.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
about archives.
Hmm.
It was about amassing information.
Hmm.
Uh, it definitely was not about music.
Hmm.
Nobody talked about music.
Yeah, and I mean, even in my coursework, that paleography was not, you had to take it. And I probably shouldn't admit this, but I did cheat sometimes because they were all done. They were editions. You could just go and find it. It was printed in modern notation. So why were we having to learn how to do this when we didn't need to? And, this was not very many courses that you're taking, at all to get your mastery. So yeah, I mean, I think that looking at the AMS programs is interesting because it gradually, these kind of hobby types of fields like American music and women in music, they started getting on the program, and then that started like there was even like film music in the 80s. But then it really started changing. And I'm sure you remember 88, Baltimore, um, that you were famous for bringing your little Casio keyboard for your Monteverdi talk. Um, but there was also a lot of, they had solicited talks on women in music.
Right, right. Yeah, things were beginning to shift then,
Hmm.
building up to that moment where everything shifted in 1990. Um, but there were other people writing about women in music. Uh, a number of people were beginning to really attract a lot of attention doing that. American music split off soon after, as did SMT and ethno, because in the days past, there would be maybe one panel on world music in the whole conference. There might be one that had anything to do with music theory, or maybe not. There might be one or two panels that had to do with American music. And so all of those subgroups ended up just splitting off because one panel was not going to be sufficient for what they needed to do. And I am hoping somehow that those subdisciplines can come back together more productively. I think we need to hear each other. We need to have a greater presence of world music in AMS. We need to have much greater presence of theory and certainly American music, although there's a lot of that now. But those groups had to split off because the discipline really just paid attention to music from before Bach. And then there was Beethoven, but then nothing else. It was even radical to do 19th century music until Joe Kerman and Robert Winter um, started the journal 19th Century Music, which everybody thought we don't need to study that. We know that music. There's no scholarship to be done about 19th century music. So even that required a kind of splitting off to deal seriously with bel canto opera, with Wagner, with that the whole concert repertoire
Yeah,
is, you know,
I was thinking that, the also one thing that was really important around this time was that great books controversy at Stanford, where for the first time it seemed like that there was this awareness that these are all, great books by dead white men or whatever. And we need to expand the canon. And then I was thinking how musicology was so conservative that they didn't even have great books. I mean, great books were the ones that you read, your great, Brahms symphonies or whatever, but don't bring them into the classroom, you know. They wouldn't even teach those.
yeah, no, and so he points out that there was ethnomusicology before this, but at a certain point they did have to branch out. There was a complication that happened much earlier than the period we're talking about. Um, but it would be nice to have a greater conversation. I think that the habit of pairing AMS with one of our other disciplines for conferences has been really healthy. And I just like to see a whole lot more of that.
Yeah, it might be that just for financial reasons that they might get back together because it's like
So few
mom,
of us doing musicology anymore. Yeah.
mom and dad are going to keep living together even though they're divorced. Can't afford to live separate. Um, yeah, we were talking a little bit about at Minnesota and the in your uh, in your autobiographical chapter, you laid it out how you seem to have come to like critical theory first and then got into the feminist stuff. And both of those two were really early. Um, and since I was at Minnesota and reading a lot of those same books. And I think that that is something I really miss is having physical books that people would run out and buy and everybody would be reading like the same book. And we just don't have that anymore either.
Yeah.
And these were, I mean, they still stand up to be, important books. They're still worth reading today. Um, but yeah, I mean that they had an impact on musicology, and that was the first time that you could see the field, opening up a little bit with the scholarship.
Yeah. Minnesota turned out to be a kind of hotbed of change in the humanities. The University of Minnesota Press uh, became one of the principal conduits for continental theory, literary theory. So they were bringing in Lyotard and Derrida and Barthes and all of these writers who were changing the conversation across the humanities. I was part of a Center for Humanistic Studies at Minnesota, and we were bringing these guys in all the time as we were publishing their books. We started a journal called Cultural Critique, uh, and so I would be at all of these talks. I would be immersed in this, and then I would go back into my uh, uh, history survey class. And it would be, okay, and now we have to memorize, what are the differences between the virelai and the rondeau, and and it was crazy making, all of these ideas, all of these books, and then a discipline that still, would test you on whether you remembered uh, whether, is this a French augmented sixth chord or an Italian augmented sixth chord? Um, uh, there were no intellectual issues at all. It was just you memorize these facts, and people are off in the archives and they are finding more facts. And that is what I tried to bring together is how can the questions that are being asked so productively in the rest of the humanities, how can these be brought into musicology? And so I was trying these things out in my classes, to say, does this make any sense to you guys? Before I started going public with any of them. But I mean, the gulf was enormous
Mhm.
between what everyone else was talking about and what we continued to pass along as the center of our discipline.
Yeah, that's amazing that Richard Leppert was in the right time and the pl right place for you.
Indeed. Yeah, no, he was a lifesaver. He was trained as a musicologist and an art historian. And he was in the humanities department. And we became very close allies. Uh, we gave together this conference, Music and Society. That was in you have the dates better than I do, probably.
85 or 86? I think it's
Yeah, I
85.
think it was 86
Okay.
or 85. And the publication of that book, I think the book was 57, or yeah, 87. I think that's really what kicked off what came to be called the new musicology. Uh,
Yeah.
we never called it that. We were
Mhm.
just doing what we thought needed to be done.
Mhm.
Uh, it was mostly the old guard that said, "Oh, here are these people doing this new stuff," and
Mhm.
so new musicology was a pejorative label,
Mhm.
um, and then it came to be just, well, that's what we call that stuff, and then it became that's really just musicology now, right? I mean, everything that we were trying to bring about, the consideration of gender, of sexualities, of race, of class, of all of these genres that had been neglected, like film music, like popular music, all of those are now in the center of the discipline. So there's no new musicology because that's kind of what it all is now. What I do miss, because in none of this did I want to get rid of Renaissance studies. That's still what I do when left to my own devices. And there is less and less room for those repertoires that used to be the very center of what everybody did. And now they're very marginal. Uh, I also uh, decry the ways in which very few people engage with music.
Mhm.
And the term the music itself is usually thrown as an insult. Oh, you deal with the music itself. Yeah, I do. Because I'm a musicologist and I think that that ought to be kind of at the center of what I do. Um, but I mean the world of musicology now is just a completely different universe. from what it was.
Yeah, and it's yeah, there's no way to try to change it or anything. I mean, it's just a reflection of our times in which we live. And that, yeah, I mean, that when I met Susan, I knocked on her door because I didn't have email, it didn't have, and I could write to her. And I do have letters from people from this time period, from professors and things, that there was no, when you got a journal in the mail, I mean, like I subscribed to things like, um, shoot. Anyway, it was like they weren't music ones, but they were exciting, and you got it and you just read it, because you didn't have anything else to read, okay? And that is so completely, we're overwhelmed with the possibilities of what we could read next, so that it is a very different world. It's kind of like you're overwhelmed with the possibilities of what you could write your dissertation on or, give at the AMS because there's no boundaries anymore, really. And even music isn't a requirement. So yeah, it's a very different situation. So yeah, I mean, that to remember what it was like, um, is also, I think, to remember what it was like in the world and the things. This was a really different world we lived in even 40 years ago. And we really opened it up. I mean, that there are women in the field now and other people that would never have been included. And that, yeah, the price is that it isn't a very unified field, I guess.
Right, right. What I worry about right now, like the last 2 weeks, many of us, when George Floyd was murdered in 2020, realized that we really needed to be paying more attention to Black composers. I think that African idioms in popular music had been studied. That music was ubiquitous, but we had not paid attention to Black composers. And I and many other people started working on including Florence Price, William Grant Still, Julius Eastman, all of these composers into our syllabi, not because we were woke, but because we were pushed by that event to think maybe I ought to listen to this music, and that is great music. And you just feel shame that somehow or other it took that event in order to push you to listen to that music. But I'm really afraid now with the things that are going on in the government that to say that we need to include the music of minorities, the music of women, that they're going to try to push us back to that place where white men are all that matters. And I think, we all have to work really hard and to be very diligent to make sure that those voices don't get erased from our syllabi and from our concerts and our recitals, that we continue to work with these voices that had been suppressed, that are now being brought out, and that we not be shamed into thinking, oh, well, we were just including them on the syllabus because they were Black. No, we weren't. We were pushed to do that to get ourselves out of that ignorant place where we were ignoring that music. So that's a difficulty.
Well, you went on strike for Vietnam, and I feel like you should have a kind of a wisdom of having seen it all. And maybe, yeah, if you could give us some advice.
Uh, I seem to get myself in trouble all the time. So I did that. Um, the first time I gave a paper at AMS was 1975, and I gave a paper on mode in Monteverdi. Sounds pretty safe, right? But at that time, the going with the conventional wisdom in Renaissance studies was that mode didn't work in that music, and so you don't talk about it. So I gave this talk, and all hell broke loose. I mean, it was a rite of spring riot. And you think, and I didn't talk about gender. I didn't talk about anything. I just talked about mode and Monteverdi. And after it really was just a riot. And Claude Paliska had to stand up and say, will everyone calm down? This is really disgraceful. They were all screaming. And one guy followed me out to where I was having lunch and stuck his dick in my face. I mean, it was just unbelievable that the hysteria. So I don't know, hysteria just kind of follows me. When I wrote that paper in the Daily at
Yeah.
Minnesota,
Yeah.
all it said was that society influences the way music is composed. And hysteria again, and somebody in the language department writing and saying, please fire this woman. And then Lynn Cheney, who was the wife
Yeah.
of Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney was the defense secretary at the time. And she was the head of the humanities program. And she went looking for tenured radicals. And oh my God, University of Minnesota was just the nesting place of all tenured radicals. And um, Dick Cheney put pressure on the university administration, saying that he would cut off all defense research, all funding for defense, if they did not fire the tenured radicals. The humanities program was folded. They backed down and said, okay, no more humanities department. Um, and that had a lot to do with why I left Minnesota. But
Yeah.
I mean,
There was there was a Wall Street Journal article too, I remember, by Christina Hoff Sommers. For some reason,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly, yeah, yeah. So I was sort of the poster child of of tenured radicals. Even though I was surrounded by all these people in the other humanities, there was something about doing this with music that got people really, really upset. Because music was supposed to be this transcendent, absolute something or other, and it couldn't have to do with anything in the world. Uh, just leave gender and sexuality to the side. It didn't have to do with anything in the world.
Mhm.
Uh, so to begin to talk about music as it relates to its social context was really explosive.
Yeah, I think you did more than that. I mean, I'm really struck by, I didn't realize that article in 1983, the Enclitic, that was your first publication. I mean, because you are completely yourself in that article. I mean, you've always sounded exactly the same. Like you have a developed voice, and it's a voice that, yeah, I mean, it can, I think, can state its views clearly, and and people know that they don't like that.
Yeah, Howard Brown once told me that I write too clearly, and so everybody gets what's at stake. And then they go off. Um, yeah. Um, I think that a man writing clearly about a lot of the same things would just be a young Turk.
Mhm, mhm,
Uh, but I mean, there was something doubly scary about my coming with critical theory as it was being developed on the continent, and then also addressing gender.
mhm,
That made all of this particularly fraught.
mhm. Even that terminal prestige was before the all of the gender
Right,
work.
right,
Yeah,
right.
and that was also controversial.
Yeah, that wasn't the next one. That was also something Richard Leppert put me up to. So, yeah,
Needed to be said. I think it is, yeah, I think it's important. And historically also that the role of new music in the sense of new great works, that we have to keep the great tradition alive. That was so important, and it really has gone away from the discourse of musicology, but also like that we can't write in tonal idioms anymore. We have to, go beyond this atonal. That was a necessary stage, and then we have to find something new. All of that is used to be some kind of premise, I think, and it isn't anymore.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, postmodernism happened. A lot
Yeah.
of things happened. Rose said she remembers composers being much more powerful in music departments. Um, One of the important events while I was at Minnesota is I used to give talks before presentations at the Walker Art Center, which mostly did modernist and postmodernist music, and also the Guthrie Theater. And they brought in Philip Glass to do his piece, The Photographer. And all of the people who were his collaborators were able to come, but he had something else he had to do. So I was asked to be on this panel to speak about Glass's music. Um, uh, none of my composer colleagues were there. They wouldn't have been caught dead there. Everybody in the theater community was there, and they started picking up on what I was doing, and I got sucked into doing theater for a while. Um, but I explained that this house had to do with temporality, ways of shaping time, blah, blah, blah. And this fed in two directions. One of the, and then I should say, my composer colleagues found out that I had spoken about Philip Glass and went in and asked that I be fired for talking about Philip Glass because he was the enemy. So that led to two things that you know. One is getting down off the beanstalk, which is not really about Beethoven, it's about minimalism and temporality. And the other is terminal prestige. Yeah. So yeah, they messed with me, and then there two explosions happened.
Well, more than that, right? Because then you did the Susanna and does the elders.
Right. Did you
Yeah.
get to see that?
No, and I wasn't, that was 87.
Well,
Uh,
it's online. You can see
oh,
it.
wow.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I did this postmodernist knockabout because I was now hanging out with theater people. And I took a Stradella oratorio, La Susanna. I had been teaching about the paintings in the Renaissance of Susanna and the Elders, these feminist exposés of, these are just pornography with guys peeking. And I thought, I wonder if this oratorio by Stradella does any of this stuff. And oh man, did it ever. And so I put together this sort of music theater piece where people were singing the oratorio, but then the staging was knocking it apart and showing what was really at issue.
Yeah.
Uh, it was enormous fun. I
Uh,
got in trouble too. But Nathan, when in what was that? It was 2018.
18?
Yeah. We decided to do a production of La Susanna straightforwardly, the whole thing. And Nathan was one of my elders. And it was enormous fun working with all of you.
I,
Sort of brought everything around full circle.
I just always kind of miss the fact that we didn't have the hats. But
I
yeah,
know, I
second
know.
as judge, that was oh, that was a riot.
Yeah. So, no, I can send you a link to Susanna Does the Elders, and you can see what it is. That was in 1987.
yeah, yeah.
And it was before I had ever published anything about women,
Mhm.
about feminism. I was acting it out in the process of performance, before I started writing about it.
Yeah, well,
Another explosion.
yes. Um, does anybody have a question? I mean, I feel like I've put forward my theories here and
Zoe?
yeah.
Yeah, I put this in the chat, and I think Vivian also put a thumbs up to this. So, who would you have us read and teach in gender and music at this critical sort of anti-DEI time?
There's so much.
Mm.
Uh, all the classic studies that have been out. At this point, I think that it isn't women and music that is really at issue, but rather the whole spectrum of LGBTQ that is at issue. Today, we just found that trans women cannot compete in athletics anymore. Trump outlawed that just today. The trans community is deeply endangered, as are all of everyone in the gay community. Remember that gay marriage has only been legal since 2015. That's not long at all. And it would be very easy to erase all of those rights. So, there's such fascinating stuff coming out about uh, uh, gay, lesbian, queer approaches to music, and trans, uh, studies having to do with the voice. I mean, what happens when a boy hits puberty and suddenly that voice becomes unrecognizable to himself? Um, what happens when uh, 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 a kid decides to transition and this influences the voice? How then do you work with that voice as you're going along? And there's just fascinating stuff that is coming out on those kinds of topics. I think that it's interesting that uh, feminist studies and queer studies hit AMS at more or less the same time. Uh, women were almost as scandalous as homosexuality to start off. I don't think that I could have done what I did with gender without Philip Brett. We worked together to try to formulate what we thought the questions should be, what the methods should be. Now we have a number of musicologists who are trans, who are going to bring the topic into yet other areas. And that's not to say that music and women that is passé, but that was sort of the tip of the spear that allowed for the opening up of dealing with genders, with sexualities, with all of those identities that, of course, could not speak their names when we were all learning about musicology.
Yeah, that's another thing, that there were only two special interest groups in 1990, or yeah, that there was the status of women, and then there was the gay and lesbian study group. And today we have something like um I don't know, like 50 special interest groups. And so that there was, if you wanted to, you kind of wanted to do something that wasn't the mainstream, there you could go to one of those or both of those, because those were the cool people. And also there was no other place to go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it did contribute to the shattering of of the society. Uh, but I think it has mostly been for the good that we have all of those special interest groups. Maxwell?
Hi, Susan. It's nice to meet you. My name is Max. I'm one of the ethnomusicologists here at OU. I was really intrigued by the point that you're bringing up about fostering interdisciplinary dialogues between musicology, ethnomusicology, music theory. I'm just curious if you can maybe expand upon that point, maybe recommendations on what that might look like and sound like.
Mhm. Um, well, the most recent thing that I know is that Georgia Cowart, when she was president of AMS, she just now stepped down. But she went to Mexico City, where she met with the heads of the organizations in musicology through South America and Central America, just to say AMS shouldn't mean just the United States. If we have an American Musicological Society, shouldn't it also have very wide representation from all over South America and from Canada and from the other Americas? And I mean, I was so impressed that she did that. She was getting ready for a hip replacement when she did that. So she was actually in a huge amount of discomfort. And yet she regarded that as maybe the most important thing she did while she was president of AMS, is to take that trip and to just meet with all of the equivalents of from all over the southern part of the hemisphere. So things like that can help. I've been also in touch with musicologists from China. They all know English. We don't know Chinese for the most part, but they are very eager to have conversations and to have dialogues going back and forth. Gavin Lee, one of our principal people now theorizing about gay and trans issues from China, from Shanghai. And he has been bringing as much North American musicology as he can into China, but we really need to reciprocate that. You know, we need to be thinking about what they do and what we can learn from that, uh, especially with all of the Chinese American composers we have now, who are very prominent. There's so many things that we can learn from each other. Kofi Agawu bringing voices from West Africa to bear. Um, uh, uh, you know, some I now don't talk about mode for the most part without talking about North Africa and Maqams, these principles that, or these kinds of ways of making music that were there not only in North Africa, but also in Muslim Spain, which is where we acquired troubadour song and our instruments and, virtually everything. I mean, to teach now about medieval music without dealing with Muslim Spain and North Africa seems to me really, really problematic. Um, so, the the world is there, and the connections are there for us just to follow out, and to make all of these things as interconnected as we know how. Any other questions? Jeffrey.
Hi, Susan. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for talking to us at OU. And I know we have other people too here. Just anecdotally, I wanted to say that I was in New York right after Feminine Endings came out, and there was that big AMS SMT joint conference. What was that, 95, 94, somewhere around there? And talk about a Stravinsky sort of chaos. I mean, I remember people giving you a really hard time, and you were absolutely unflappable. And I mean, it's really great because I mean that was before obviously I could apprehend the historical significance of that book, and now it's fun to think back to, to that. If this is not too intrusive a question, I was wondering, building on what Max asked you, how do you yourself identify? I mean, obviously as a musicologist, but also as a music theorist, or do you think that that distinction, whereas your scholarship is concerned, is actually irrelevant?
I have always been in between those, and I mean, if we had not separated those disciplines from each other, there wouldn't be a question there. But my dissertation was very highly theoretical. It presented a theory of the grammar of 16th century music and then explained what had to change to make that into what we would recognize as common practice tonality. So it was very, very theoretical. It hadn't anything to do with the world. This is before I encountered Adorno through Rose Subotnick. But it was very, very theoretical. When I went on the job market, I was applying for both theory and musicology jobs. And at the University of Minnesota, they had an opening in both of those. And then the search committees found that they both had wanted to have me come in for an interview. And they both offered me the job. And at that point, I had to decide which I wanted to be in my day life. And that was easy because I could teach as much theory and analysis as I wanted in my history classes. If I had gone in as a theory teacher, I would have spent all my time correcting parallel fifths. And so it was very easy. But I have continued to operate as a theorist all the way through my career. I don't know how to separate history from theory if I'm dealing with music. Uh, I think that the outside world, as that explosive article in at the University of Minnesota, that society has something to do with how music works. I still believe that. So if I'm going to be dealing with how a piece of music works, I have to have the context. I have to know what the social context was. I have to know what kinds of things were weighing on that. But I also have always insisted on dealing with the music itself. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble again. Somebody's dogs are after me. Um, So I I mean, I don't like the split. I was there when SMT split off. It was a really fraught meeting. And the people who wanted to split off were saying, well, we want rigor. We don't have any rigor. And Leonard Meyer stood up and said, you'll get rigor, okay? You'll get rigor mortis. And when the split happened, the theorists ran over as far as they could from anything having to do with context. And they played their glass bead games. What's interesting is that I think theorists have come back more to what I do than historians have. So in a lot of ways, I feel that I identify more as a theorist a lot of the time than as a musicologist per se. But again, I don't like the distinction. I don't, it doesn't make sense to me.
So would you go so far as to say that an ideal condition would be maybe the abolition of these distinctions, and we can just all work in this sort of interdisciplinary landscape?
That would be nice, except that I know that you have a program committee and it's still going to be likely to say, let's put all those people who are doing pitch class sets over in this corner. And then you begin to get the kind of frustration that led to the split in the first place. I have argued to Georgia Cowart, who is my colleague and my best friend, that it would be nice if our connections were greater. And she actually did a lot of work while she was president, bringing the presidents of SMT and SEM and SAM together to talk about how our disciplines can be closer. So I know that this has become a very major talking point. And I think that would be great. Um, but it will take work and follow up and goodwill on the part of everyone up and down that spectrum.
Thank you.
Mhm. Oh dear. So how would you encourage students who care about the integration of theory, musicology, and performance to pursue their goal while it seems most performance practice teachers warn students about the danger of integration? Oh, yeah. No, so I teach a lot of my courses at the Cleveland Institute of Music, which I love because these are people who have signed on for life to do classical music. Most of my musicology graduate students are off doing film music, they're doing Broadway musicals, they're doing hip hop, they're doing everything else. They don't really care very much about the canon. I still kind of care about the canon. And so my students at CIM, all of whom have to care about the canon, I can teach courses for them where I am integrating performance and history and theory and analysis, all of those things. I have two courses that I repeat. One is on Beethoven quartets, which I was already doing when I was at Minnesota, and the other on Mahler. And I try to teach them why they need to know history and they need to know how to analyze to make for effective performance. So we listen to excerpts of recordings, and we talk about what works, what doesn't work, what are the options, what might you experiment with. Uh, Today, I and my pretonal theory class for our historical performance students, we were dealing with the recordings by a Swiss group, Profeti Quinte, which is just an amazing group. And we talked a lot about how it is that they were understanding these scores and what were they doing to make these performances as effective as they are. You know that they have analyzed all this stuff because the way the music work is coming through so well, as opposed to most of the recordings of 16th century music in which everyone thinks that the main goal is to sound pretty. They do not sound pretty. They sound pretty ghastly. They sometimes use voices that sound like they are from heavy metal. And they all are carrying their own parts independently of each other. So you are caught in this maelstrom of all these voices, each of which wants to be the mode-bearing voice, and it rips you apart. And that is the point of that music. Um, and thank God, these students got it. And they went, oh, yeah, we want to do that stuff. Um, so performance, history, theory, again, I don't know how to separate those out from each other. I think they're all necessarily part of the same project. And I try to impress that on my analysis students, on my history students, and on my performing students. Okay. So are any last questions, or are you going to let me go?
You are so inspiring, Susan. I wish you could become the president of this new organization, the world's music organization for everybody.
I don't like doing administration, Sana. I dry up and die when I do administration. So, please spare me. I'll just continue to write things that raise everybody's standard.
Yeah, and I think that everybody should go and eagerly pre-order this new book that I got to read a couple chapters from. So
Yeah, it will be coming out from Oxford. I'm right now doing proofs and index.
oh wow.
It's on the way. It's called Making Sense of Music, 20 chapters of repertoire ranging from dirty songs by Claudin de Sarmizy to operas written the year before Kaya Sariaho died last year. So, kind of the whole gamut.
Sounds exhausting, and you're putting us all to shame.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Susan. It really,
Yeah,
what a pleasure to have you here and to see you again.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you really helped kickstart this new kind of nascent musicology, ethnomusicology colloquium series in a really spectacular way. So we really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, have a good evening, all of you. It was great talking to you. I'm available for anything, and just email me if you have other questions, if you want to bring something up anytime. I'm really good at responding to email. So
There again, she just puts us to shame. Thank you so much, Susan. It's so great to see you.
you are very welcome.
Bye.
And thanks to the University of Oklahoma for sponsoring.